Normally my day job is at Cisco, but I just founded a company two hours ago with two colleagues here in the audience. Yes. So I'm the CEO of Everyday Birthday, and and my chairman up there, Mona, and Joanne is co-founder, and she does all the other CXO roles in the company. She just doesn't know yet. No, seriously, I'm here as the chairman of the Asia Cloud Computing Association. That's my night job. It's an association that's been going for about 5 years now, focused on cloud computing in Asia and really accelerating cloud computing in Asia. And we do a lot of different types of activities, but one of the things that's probably most visible is the research that we put out, available on our website. So you can go to asiacloudcomputing.org and have a look at some of this research. We put out a cloud computing readiness index for 14 top economies in Asia, and really where we're rating how ready a country is in terms of offering cloud computing services. And we use that in order to engage governments, government departments, whether it is those that are focused on infrastructure or those that are focused on policy towards using IT, for also regulatory bodies around data sovereignty and the things that they do there. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. That's kind of scene setting and hopefully giving me credibility to talk to you about cloud computing. Now, how many of you are aware of cloud computing and could describe it in, let's say, 50 words or less? Any volunteers? Oh, a couple of people. Okay. So I don't have a hard audience then. No, really what I want to do is talk about how cloud computing is used by crowdfunding and crowdsourcing organizations. And this idea germinated through the session I did last year at this conference, where I talked about cloud or crowd. Is it a synonym or a homonym? A little bit of tongue-in-cheek there, but the idea was really to start to explore this. And when I started to talk to some of you that are in this room, and I developed the idea with Epi a little bit more over the year, we decided that it would be interesting to survey crowdfunding and crowdsourcing companies to see how they are using cloud computing in their businesses. You know, are they using it at the front end in terms of interacting with their stakeholders? Are they using it at the back end more for operational reasons? Are they developing some unique IP around using cloud computing platforms? And so we put together a small survey. I certainly thank Epi for pushing it and trying to get as many people as possible to answer the survey. Unfortunately, as a group, and I'll include myself in this, we don't do well with filling out surveys. I got 4 surveys back. Now, that's okay. I can share with you some of the things we did there. Some of the companies are in this room that answered the survey. You'll see who they are when I bring it up. But hopefully, it'll give some of you some food for thought, and for those of you who didn't fill out the survey, then hopefully that'll give you the impetus to fill it out, and we can actually build a white paper, which is really what we wanted to do in this. We don't really have enough data for a white paper, but enough for this discussion. So, cloud and crowd, 5 common characteristics, and I talked about this last year, but If you take the 5 characteristics of cloud computing, and these are defined, that you can go on the web, NIST, N-I-S-T, National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States, produced a standard which lists these 5 characteristics. So on-demand self-service. And typically, a lot of crowdfunding, crowdsourcing is on-demand self-service, right? Or at least there is an element to that. There's also an element of resource pooling, right? Where you're getting, if you want a pool of resources, all types of resources, typically human resources, but also money, right? If you're in crowdfunding, and using that, leveraging that pool of resources for the service or the value proposition. Now, broad network access, probably not in a classic network piece, but there's been, I think, enough talks today that talks about the power of networking with people. I love the idea that Roland did right after lunch and showed us, just the power of networking just amongst a few of us, but really making the point with his birthday analogy of, no one would ever think, unless you've done the math, no one would ever think that there's a chance, a 1 in 2 chance of 2 people having their birthdays if there's only 23 people, right? And that's the networking piece that's not intuitively obvious to a lot of us. But networking is a strong part, obviously, of crowdsourcing, but also without networking and that inter-networking, you'll never make cloud computing successful either. It's a measured service also. So, typically you measure the value of the service and also the consumption of it, and you bill for it accordingly. And this last piece about rapid elasticity, that's often associated with cloud computing, but that's not often seen necessarily in crowdsourcing. But let me take you through some examples here, and hopefully it'll get you thinking about maybe elasticity needs to be part of the services that we offer as crowdsourcing, crowdfunding companies. So I thought I'd take Grab Taxi. I know they're not here this week, but I thought I'd use them as an analogy for cloud, right? So it's a menu, right? It's on demand. It's an app. How many of you use Grab Taxi? Okay, practically everybody does. Okay, it's an app. It's on demand, and you can get it. You just bring it up on an app, and it's there. It uses or leverages a pool of resources. Basically, you have access to all the taxis or taxi drivers who run this app themselves, right? And so I know until probably 8 months ago, I was not a user of Grab Taxi. Now I don't use anything else. Even when I'm at a taxi stand, I use Grab Taxi. Right? And it really gives you that resource pooling and the ability to leverage that resource. You need a network. Okay, this is stretching things a little bit, but really, if you think about it, right, Grab Taxi couldn't exist without GPS, couldn't exist, well, maybe it could exist without Wi-Fi, but certainly you need GPS, certainly you need 3G or some kind of ability to connect. Wi-Fi helps, right? All of that, and there's possibly some possibilities with Bluetooth in terms of providing information within the taxi, which hasn't been explored yet. Okay, and obviously it's a measured service, right? You pay for it when you use it, when you consume it. It's really a pay-per-use. Now, the elasticity part, that last piece, was one that I had a challenge with, and you might groan if you accept that, but Grab Car, which is associated with Grab Taxi, really gives you that elasticity piece. If you need a car for a lot longer than just one taxi ride, if you need it for a lot more than just 2 or 3 people, right? You can get a car, you can get a 13-seater for 4 hours, for 8 hours, right? So it gives you that elasticity of, from a service. So hopefully that at least equates crowd and cloud for you in your minds. So let me go to our survey. Here's our survey, and there are 4 companies that responded to the survey. ASSOB, which have they presented yet? Tomorrow? Thursday? Okay, thank you. Chaotix, Gengo, and Possible. Okay? Right, and so this is really a summary of the survey. You can see it's not particularly onerous to answer as a survey, but what can we pull out of it? So this first part, the use of IT, the percentage of IT that's in cloud. And if you ignore the first company for a second, or the first association, the other 3 pretty much are exclusively on cloud. And I would have expected that for crowdfunding, crowdsourcing. You know, typically startup area, and you're not going to go and invest a lot in IT resources, at least in physical infrastructure, and then even in platform development or even software development, right? You might not necessarily. You'll pull as much of it as possible off the web. Now, ASSOB, okay, they're kind of in a regulated industry, right? It's for small businesses getting financing for small businesses, and it's not quite a stock exchange, but it's regulated somewhat like a stock exchange. So they can't put everything on the cloud. So they use a back-end business process as a service as their piece of using cloud. In terms of how important is commodity, network bandwidth, pools of service, and you see that, medium to high to even very high, the use of networks and also the use of pools, right? I would have expected just small and medium. Basically the survey, the results that I got back with regard to the pools of blocks of IT that they're using. They're using it in small chunks, right? Which is what I expected. Elasticity, I expected a lot more from that perspective. How important is having that agility, the ability to go and select services off the web, even through an API, or at least using a portal. So certainly I think the survey is showing that there is that thinking. And again, ASSOB, I didn't expect them, because of the semi-regulated space that they're in, to really be much more of a cloud user. The fact that they're static and they manually choose their service is not a big surprise there. How many clouds are they using? How do they pay for it? Most of it is pay-per-use, although it's interesting to see that Possible uses really reserved. So I don't know if you know about cloud computing in general, but cloud computing services, the highest you pay is on a pay-per-use, right? So if you don't make any reservation, but use it, really consume it as you're using it, well, for the service provider, they actually, for them, it's hard to predict demand, right? So they're going to charge you the most for that. Possible, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, if anybody in the audience is from there, is looking to, and I haven't actually talked to them, but I posit that they're looking to actually save some money. They're really at that, in the nonprofit kind of charity space, and so they're, as much as possible, they're looking for their fixed level of IT, the non-elastic part of it, is reserve it, and then for their non-fixed part, they do a pay-per-use model. And Gengo, who's been going probably the longest of these organizations, is looking really across cloud providers to maximize the operation side. So that's why they leverage more than just 2 or 3 cloud providers. And then the final piece around, are they using what's commonly called public cloud, private cloud, or a hybrid approach? And you see pretty much there, everyone's using public cloud, right? It's third party, and they're using the standard cloud service. They're not looking to customize that service. So that's a result of the survey. As I said, we were hoping to draw, or I was hoping to draw a lot more conclusions, but with only 4 respondents, this hopefully gives you some ideas for your own business. I have some slides here now on each of the companies, and this is not to take away from their presentation, but okay, ASOB, it's a crowdfunding facility for small businesses in Australia, to raise equity for $250K to $5 million. So it's, as I said, a traditional market segment that's using crowdfunding, and they have 2 types of customers or stakeholders, right? Investors and entrepreneurs. And they don't, if you look at them as a business, it's not a business that's, it's a very predictable business. So it's not surprising that, they're static and they're using manual-based cloud services. Cloud is not critical to their operational organization. As I said, the demand for IT services is well established. The question I guess I have to them is, are they susceptible to disruption by a business model that is fully based on the cloud? I don't have an answer to the question, but it's certainly, when I was looking at their responses to the survey and considering their business, right? Yes, it's true they're in this regulated industry, but what if another player came along, and could they possibly use a fully in the cloud model and get a lot more interaction between investors and entrepreneurs? As far as the next one, Possible, I went to them next. They were last on the survey list, but which was only in alphabetical order anyway. But this is another crowdfunding company. It's a crowdfunding platform for community creative projects, right? Not-for-profit and charities. Now they have a lot more projects, right? They have thousands, if not 10,000s of donors, right? Hundreds of projects in 21 categories. So just in terms of sheer numbers and scale, right, they're a lot bigger. Not necessarily in money, but in terms of the number of people and stakeholders that they interact with. Right? And so cloud compute, and they've really embraced cloud computing, and it's not surprising given the dynamic nature of their business. Right? Using cloud technologies for IT resources is ideal for this not-for-profit organization, and they've developed their own applications using standard development tools. Right? If you remember, it was PaaS, Platform as a Service, or a development platform that they essentially use across their whole business, front end, back end, and development. How can they expand the number of projects can be funded by further leveraging cloud was really my question to them. Again, I don't have an answer, but I think they might even do it even more depending on, and as I say, I haven't talked to them directly, so just a question that came out of the result of their surveys. Chaotix, you heard from Shelley, I believe her name is. I don't know if she's no, she's not in the audience. You heard this morning, right? I don't know if she presented on Chaotix or her new venture, but anyway, the power of crowdsourcing to help world's leading companies and organizations gain actionable insight and competitive advantage, right? Wide spectrum of project scope, size, and duration, right? So certainly a dynamic nature to their business. They're not big into cloud, but they do use cloud computing across their operation. no need to own their own IT infrastructure, right? They can just pull up IT infrastructure as and when they need it in each of the project. One question really I had for them was how much of their future innovation projects are going to be based on things like big data, on IoT, and where cloud computing is a very important element to bring that full power into their business. Right. And then finally, last one, Gengo, if I pronounced that right. Right, a web-based human translation company based in Japan, translating 34 languages. Seems like a standard enough crowd sourcing business. When you look at their business model, though, they have over 10,000 translators, right, working on various projects. Right, IT resources are a critical piece of connecting those 10,000 translators to the, folks who actually, to their customers who want to actually translate stuff. Right? And in fact, if you really think about their service is a cloud computing service, right? It's a business process, which is translation, as a service. Okay, they have different SLAs, it's a measured service. Every characteristic that I talked about at the beginning of the talk really is really what Genko's service is all about, right? So for me, that's a great example of how a crowdsourcing service is very much like cloud computing. And in fact, they're the ones that leverage the power of cloud computing the most out of the four companies that responded to the survey. That doesn't mean that they're the best. I'm just saying in terms of what we were looking for was to see how well cloud and crowd go together. And it really does depend on a per business basis. So lastly, conclusion, right? Is the use of cloud computing synonymous with crowd-based businesses, right? How are those really work together? Well, as I presented at the beginning with using the Grab taxi as an example, I think there's a lot of similarities between the characteristics of crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, and cloud computing. Right? Crowdfunding, I think, can be facilitated by cloud computing, but I don't, this is more anecdotal for what's been presented here. Right? Crowdsourcing that targets a large number of suppliers with varying project sizes can benefit from cloud, and I think we've seen that in a number of examples that I presented. The last thought I'd leave you with is crowdsourced ecosystems linked with cloud computing are going to play a major role in the development of the future economy. And that's really more a theory that I'm putting out there, but I'll give you an example of this. In Singapore, Cisco has been involved in a particular project with SUTD, okay, Singapore University of Technology and Design. Just recently, we've funded a lab, well, we actually funded infrastructure, cloud infrastructure for them. And this cloud infrastructure is going to be used in order for students, but also for small design houses to design their own chips. Now you might think, well, okay, that sounds pretty technical, and why would I even think about crowdsourcing for chip design, right? There's really three main chip designers in the world, three big ones, and then mostly everybody else is disappearing. Well, if you think about the Internet of Things, and you think about all of the possibilities that we have available in terms of building sensors, of measuring environments, of coming up with some creative ideas that need these unique sensors, and therefore sensors by definition will have silicon in them, they'll have chips in them. And designing those chips, you're not going to get those three design houses, and I won't name them because I don't want to shame them, but it's not in their business model to start building these small runs of chips. But what if you could do the design through crowdsourcing in the cloud? Then you can get some pretty unique sensors quite quickly and at a relatively low cost, not a high setup cost to design chips. And then you can add software to that and really get this IoT economy to start firing with all kinds of ideas and innovation. So just leave you with that thought at this point.